On my first day at the new job, I noticed a picture of my husband on a colleague's desk. I smiled and asked her, "Who's this?" She replied proudly, "That's my boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years. And we're planning to get married at the end of the year." On my first day at the new company, I had promised myself to remain calm. A new beginning at 32 is no simple thing. But I believed I was strong enough. My name is Lena Hayes. I had just accepted a position as a senior marketing director at a rising tech company in New York City called Innovate Tech Solutions. I had fought many battles in my career, presented multi-million-dollar plans, and sat in meetings with the most difficult people imaginable. I thought nothing in an office could make me lose control. I was wrong. My desk was next to a frosted glass partition. On the other side sat a young woman with a gentle demeanor. Her long hair in soft waves. Her makeup just right. A faint scent of perfume in the air. She turned to me with a radiant smile. So friendly it put you instantly at ease. "You must be Lena, right? I'm Maya Chen, a project coordinator on your team. Welcome to Innovate." I smiled and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Maya. I hope we'll work well together." I set my bag down, pulling out my laptop. My mind was already running through a checklist. Get up to speed on projects. Review the budget. Read market research. Schedule a team meeting. But my eyes were unconsciously drawn to Maya's desk. Not because she was pretty or because of the way she smiled, but because of a picture frame placed in the left corner next to a small potted plant. The silver-plated frame was polished so meticulously it reflected the overhead lights as if its owner cherished it daily. In that photograph was my husband. I wasn't mistaken. I couldn't be. The man in the dark blue dress shirt. His familiar crooked smile. The dimple on his left cheek. His eyes looking straight at the camera with a mix of warmth and confidence. That was Michael Vance. My husband. The man who just last night had been in our kitchen making me pasta. Who had hugged me from behind and said, "First day tomorrow. You've got this, honey." The photo had another detail that made my chest tighten. The shirt he was wearing was one I'd bought him for our 3rd wedding anniversary. And if you looked closely, the background was a turquoise sea with leaning palm trees. It was the exact beach in Maui where we had vacationed after I closed a huge deal. That photo was supposed to be in a frame on our nightstand at home. I remembered because I was the one who put it there. Yet, here it was on the desk of a young woman at my new company. A stark, undeniable truth laid out right before my eyes. My ears started to ring. I felt a rush of hot blood to my head that then drained down to my feet. I didn't fall, but my knees went weak. I had been through a lot in my life, but in that moment, I understood what it felt like for your world to silently collapse. I didn't ask right away. I sat down, took a deep breath, and typed a few meaningless words on my laptop as a self-defense reflex. Then, I turned, keeping my voice as light as a newcomer's. "Maya, who's in the picture?" "He's handsome." Mia's eyes lit up as if I'd touched on her favorite subject. She pulled the frame closer, gently wiping the glass as if it were a precious jewel. "That's my boyfriend. We've been together for 3 years. This is my favorite picture of him. So, I brought it to the office for motivation. We're getting married at the end of the year." The words 3 years landed like a heavy stone. 3 years. Michael and I had been married for 7. That meant he'd had someone else since the 4th year of our marriage. I was still smiling. The smile of a woman long accustomed to hiding her emotions behind a flawless layer of makeup. Anyone looking would have thought I was just making polite conversation. "So, you're going to be a bride soon. Congratulations." "Thank you. I'm so excited," Maya said, holding out her hand to me. On her ring finger was a diamond ring that blazed under the office lights. It wasn't a simple design. You could tell instantly it was expensive. The large stone was expertly cut, reflecting light like a blade. "He proposed last month. He said he wants to give me the wedding I deserve. We're planning the reception at a big hotel in Midtown. I've already started looking at dresses." My throat felt dry. Michael had once told me he disliked ostentatious things. That an engagement ring only needed to be simple because love wasn't measured in carats. I had believed him then. wearing the thin plain wedding band he said suited our style. I had been proud of that subtlety. Now I understood. It wasn't that he disliked grand gestures. He was just saving them for someone else. I forced my voice to stay normal. "What's your boyfriend's name?" "Michael Vance." Maya replied as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "He works in finance. He's brilliant. He's been so busy lately. Working late a lot. But he loves me so much." I repeated the name in my head. Michael Vance. My husband. The man who told me last night he'd be late all week because of a project. The man who kissed my forehead this morning before leaving the house. I heard myself ask, my voice still steady, with just the right amount of curiosity. "Where did you two meet?" "At an industry conference." He was a speaker. "And I approached him for his contact info," Maya said, smiling like a girl recounting a fairy tale romance. "He was a little cold at first, but I was persistent and he softened up. He said I was the one who made him want to settle down." Settle down. The phrase sounded like a cruel joke. I was his wife. I was the one he had already settled down with. Legally bound by a marriage certificate. I blinked once. Just once. To keep my eyes from turning red. I thought of all the times he'd used late meetings as an excuse. The text saying he was still at the office. The weekends he claimed he had an urgent appointment. I'd grumbled a little, but always let it go because I trusted him. I trusted him the way I trusted that the roof over my head wouldn't spontaneously catch fire. Suddenly, Maya looked at me and asked a question that felt like a punch to the gut. "Lena, are you married?" I glanced at the picture on her desk one more time. Michael's smile in the photo was the exact same smile he gave me. A thing that it turned out could be split in 2 or 3 and still look just as whole and real. I answered without a change in my expression. "Yes, I am. For 7 years." Maya's eyes widened slightly. And then she let out a soft laugh as if she just heard a distant story. 7 years? That's so long. I bet things are pretty settled now. Huh? I hear people say it's easy to get bored after 7 years. She said it so innocently. But every word was a thin knife slicing at my skin. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at fate for putting me in this situation. This other woman knew nothing. Casually talking about 7 years while I had to stand in the middle of my new office and play my part perfectly. I nodded with a faint smile. Being settled can be a form of happiness. What matters is respect and honesty. Maya nodded in agreement and turned back to her computer screen. I turned back to mine. The project plan was on the screen. Budget figures. Implementation items. But I couldn't read the words anymore. Something inside me was warring like a machine that had just been activated. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't lunge across the partition to snatch the photo or slap anyone. I just sat up straight, placed my hands on the keyboard, and felt my fingernails dig into my palms until it hurt. A single thought echoed in my mind. I have to know how far this has gone. A moment later, someone from HR poked her head around the corner. "Lena, our director, Mark, would like to see you in the conference room for a quick project debrief." I stood up. "Okay. I'm on my way." I walked past Maya's desk. She was still focused on her work, occasionally glancing at the photo and smiling. It was a smile of such pure happiness. It sent a chill down my spine. I walked to the elevator, looking at my reflection in the polished metal doors. A well-fitted grey pantsuit. Hair in a neat bun. Dark lipstick. Sharp eyeliner. I looked like a successful woman embarking on a new chapter of her life. No one could know that just minutes ago, my life had been torn apart by a single picture frame. As the elevator doors closed, I put a hand to my chest. My heart was still beating, but not in its normal rhythm. It was pounding out a warning. Don't be weak. Don't show it. Don't lose control. I had lived for 7 years in a marriage I thought was safe. If Michael could build a second life right behind my back, then I could build something for myself, too. A plan. I didn't know where that plan would take me, but I knew one thing for certain. From this day on, I was no longer the naive wife who believed in the words working late. I would be the woman who uncovers the whole truth and takes back what belongs to her. And I would start right here in this very company. The first meeting at my new company passed like a slow-motion film. I sat at the head of the table, a screen full of market data in front of me. Surrounded by the faces of new colleagues, they talked about product promotion strategies, media budgets, and plans for the next quarter. I nodded, took notes, and occasionally offered a timely, professional comment, enough to make everyone think I was focused. But my mind wasn't in that room. It was replaying the image of the photo on Maya's desk and her words. "We've been together for 3 years. 3 years." That number was like a crack running through my 7-year marriage, making everything that came before feel uncertain. When the meeting ended, people filed out. Mark, the director, stayed behind, looking at me with satisfaction. "Lena, you grasped things very quickly. I heard you came from a big firm in Chicago. You must have a lot of experience to bring to New York." I smiled and nodded. "Thank you, Mark. I'm just eager to integrate with the team." He gave a small laugh. "This team is young, but they are solid. Oh, by the way, the company will have a new investment consultant from a partner group soon. He's quite important. You'll probably be working with him as well." I didn't pay much attention to his comment, assuming it was standard office news. But I asked politely, "When is he starting?" "Sometime next week. Maybe. I haven't met him in person yet. Just heard it from upper management." I nodded and left the conference room. As I walked down the hallway, I realized I was clutching my notebook so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I relaxed my hand and took a deep breath. My mind now had only one goal: verification. Not because I was clinging to the faint hope of a misunderstanding. I knew I hadn't been mistaken, but I needed to know how deep this went. Back at my desk, Maya was typing away. The photo was still in its corner, as if oblivious to the fact that it had just detonated someone's life. I sat down and opened my laptop, but my gaze drifted over to her desk again. Maya noticed me looking and smiled. "Lena, the team usually eats at a deli around the corner for lunch. Want to join?" I nodded. "Sure. I'd like that." While waiting for lunch, I tried to review project documents, but my fingers opened another tab. Social media. I typed in Michael's name. His profile appeared immediately. The profile picture was still the one of the two of us taken 2 years ago on a trip to San Diego. I stared at it for a few seconds. In the photo, I was leaning on his shoulder, my smile completely genuine. Back then, I believed the man beside me was my rock for life. I scrolled down. His recent posts were all work-related, pictures of meetings, conferences, quotes about investment and business. There was no trace of another relationship. I wasn't surprised. Michael had always been a private person, careful not to expose his personal life. But one photo from 2 months ago caught my eye. He was on stage at a finance conference speaking to a large audience. Below the photo was a comment. "So proud of you." The account belonged to Maya Chen. I looked at that picture for a long time. Michael was wearing a black suit, the stage lights illuminating his confident face. I remembered that day. He had told me he had to fly to Chicago for a meeting with a partner. I had even reminded him to take care of himself because his schedule was so packed. It turned out he was right here in this city standing before a crowd with the other woman looking up at him with adoring eyes. A cold feeling ran down my spine. It wasn't jealousy. It was clarity. I was beginning to understand that this relationship wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was built step by step with planning and deception. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "First day going okay, honey?" I stared at the words for a few seconds. If this had been this morning, I would have replied immediately with a smiling emoji. But now those words felt like part of a performance. I typed a short response. "It's fine. The company's nice." He replied instantly. "Glad to hear it. I'll be home a little late tonight. Have a client dinner." I stared at the screen. Client dinner? Those 2 words suddenly felt heavy. I slowly typed back. "Okay. You get your work done." That was all. No more questions. No nagging. I put the phone down. At noon, the team went to lunch. The deli was in a small alley a few minutes' walk from the office. It was a simple place with wooden tables and the rich aroma of fresh bread and coffee. Everyone chatted cheerfully while they ate. I joined in, but my attention was still on Maya. She told stories naturally, laughed a lot, and sometimes mentioned Michael with a proud tone. He's so busy. Working in finance means he's always running from one project to the next. But he still makes time for me. A colleague teased. You're lucky to have such a great future husband. Maya blushed. He said, after we get married at the end of the year, we'll buy our own place. He's looking at some luxury condos in Tribeca. My hand, holding my sandwich, froze for a second. Tribeca. Michael had also told me he was considering investing in a condo there. He said it was for rental income or as an asset. I had believed him. Maya continued, her eyes shining. He says a man has to be able to provide for his family. Hearing that makes me feel so secure. I took a bite of my sandwich, which felt dry and tasteless in my throat. I looked at the young woman across from me. She had no idea she was a character in such a complicated story. To her, this man was the perfect lover. After lunch, we returned to the office. As I walked in, I saw the picture on her desk again. This time, I didn't feel shocked. I felt something else. Resolve. I opened my laptop and truly began to work. While everyone thought I was reading project documents, I secretly opened a private spreadsheet. I recorded the information I had just learned. Her name, how long they'd been together, the conference, the plan to buy a condo, Tribeca. Each detail was like a piece of a puzzle. The afternoon passed quickly. When it was time to leave, I packed up my things. Good night, everyone. Maya stood up. 2. Lena. Which way are you heading? I'm taking the subway. I'm getting an Uber. Okay. See you tomorrow. Then, I nodded. As I stepped out of the building, the sky was turning orange. The city was crowded. Traffic was dense. And lights were beginning to flicker on. I stood on the sidewalk waiting for my car. While I waited, my phone rang. It was Michael. I answered. Hey, I'm on my way to meet the client now. You go ahead and have dinner. Okay. I looked at the stream of cars in front of me. My voice calm. Okay. He chuckled softly. You must be tired after your first full day. Get some rest. Okay. The call ended. I stood still for a moment. A clear thought forming in my mind. If he could build a second life behind my back for 3 years. The truth certainly didn't stop at what I saw today. I got into the Uber. As the car pulled into traffic, I opened my phone's contacts and found a name. Jessica Reed. Attorney. I didn't press call. I just looked at the name for a few seconds, then turned off the screen. I knew I didn't need to act rashly, but I also knew that from today on, I would start collecting everything. Evidence. Timelines. Financial records. All of it. Because if this marriage was built on betrayal, I would not be the one leaving with nothing. My story had only just begun. The Uber stopped in front of my apartment building as night had fully set in. The warm lights of the luxury high-rise cast a glow on the stone-paved entrance, looking so peaceful that any outsider would assume it was home to happy families. I paid the driver and walked slowly into the lobby. The doorman, who knew me, smiled and greeted me. Good evening, Mrs. Vance. Home early today. I nodded. First day at the new job. A bit tired. The elevator doors closed, taking me up to the 16th floor. When I opened the door to our apartment, the familiar scent of home made my heart sink. Everything was the same. The grey sofa I had picked out, the oak coffee table Michael loved, and the landscape painting in the living room that we bought on a trip to Vermont years ago. A home built on 7 years of life together, where every object held a memory. But now, as I looked around, I no longer felt warmth. I only saw question marks. I put my bag down, changed my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. Out of habit, I opened the fridge to see what I could make for dinner. Then I stopped. Michael had said, I'll be late tonight. Client dinner. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. The word client had suddenly become something very vague. I closed the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat on the sofa. My phone was in my hand. Part of me wanted to look at Maya's social media again. Another part wanted to go through my husband's phone for more clues. But I didn't. I understood one thing clearly. If I acted on emotion, I would make mistakes. I needed to be calm. Around 8:00 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Just finished up. Probably won't be home until after 10. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then stood up and went into the bedroom. The drawer on the right side of the bed was where Michael kept some personal papers. I pulled it open. Inside were his passport, some old contracts, and a small notebook. I opened the notebook. It contained only a few work-related notes and appointment reminders. Nothing special. I put it back and looked at his side of the closet. His dress shirts were hung in a neat row. I walked over, running my hand over each one. Suddenly, I stopped at a dark blue V-neck shirt. I remembered this one. Michael had worn it to a finance conference. The same one from the picture I saw on social media earlier. I took the shirt down and checked the pockets. Inside was a restaurant receipt. A Japanese restaurant in Soho. The date on the receipt was from 3 weeks ago. The total was nearly $400. I stared at the receipt. A memory surfacing. 3 weeks ago. On that night, Michael had told me he had a dinner with a client. I had even asked if he wanted me to wait up for him. He said not to, as the meeting might run long. I sat on the edge of the bed, the receipt still in my hand. 3 years. 3 years was not a short time. That meant for the past 3 years, many evenings like this one had taken place. I opened my phone and found Maya's profile again. This time, I scrolled more carefully through her travel photos, food pictures, and cheerful status updates. Most of them didn't mention Michael directly, but occasionally I recognized familiar details. A man's watch on a coffee table, the same watch I had given Michael for his birthday. A photo of a wine glass with 2 glasses opposite each other. I looked closely at the corner of the picture. There was a man's hand resting on the table. The ring on that hand was our wedding band. I put the phone down and exhaled slowly. There was no doubt anymore. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He was living a parallel life. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard the door open. Michael walked in just like any other day. He took off his jacket, hung it up, and saw me sitting in the living room. "You're still up? I was waiting for you." He smiled and walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. "How was your first day?" "Really?" I looked straight into his eyes. "It was okay." He nodded and went to the kitchen for some water. I watched his every move. The way he opened the fridge. The way he drank his water. The way he walked into the bedroom. It was all so familiar. But now I saw it all through a different lens. When he came back to the living room, I asked a very normal question. "Which client did you meet with tonight?" Michael answered without hesitation. "An investment group from Singapore. They are looking to partner on a new finance project." He spoke so fluently, as if the story were completely true. I nodded and didn't ask anything else. Before I would have believed him. But now I understood that Michael had become accustomed to lying. He sat down next to me, putting his arm around my shoulder out of habit. "If you're tired, you should get some sleep." I looked at him for a few seconds. In my mind, I saw Maya's radiant smile as she talked about her man. 2 women. One who believed she was the wife. One who believed she was the future wife. And the man sitting in front of me was living comfortably between those 2 beliefs. I stood up. "I'm going to bed." I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. As I lay down, I could hear Michael in the shower, the water running steadily. I stared at the ceiling, my mind wide awake. I knew I had 2 choices. Explode now, question him, and turn this house into a war zone. Or stay silent, gather everything, and make a decision when I had the full picture. I chose the second path. About half an hour later, Michael came to bed. He lay down beside me, turned off the light, and put his arm around me like he did every night. "Sleep well, honey." I closed my eyes, but I wasn't sleeping in the darkness. I was quietly thinking about my plan. Tomorrow, I would start with the smallest things. his work schedule, the flow of money in our joint account, and the meetings he called with clients. Because if Michael could hide 3 years, I could be patient enough to see the whole truth. And when the truth came out, I would be the one to decide how this story ends. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside the window was still a bit hazy, the sun just beginning to peek over the distant skyscrapers. Michael was still asleep beside me, his breathing even, his arm resting lightly on my waist, as it did every morning. Anyone looking at this scene would think we were a peaceful family, but I knew that behind that peaceful facade, a truth was slowly being uncovered. I gently removed his arm, got out of bed, and went to the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror was calm, but my eyes looked sharper than usual. I washed my face for a long time, as if trying to fully awaken my senses. When I came out, Michael was awake. He was sitting up in bed, his hair messy, smiling at me. "Up so early, honey?" I nodded. "I have to get to the office a little early today." He got up, walked over, and gave me a light kiss on the forehead. His morning routine. "Was yesterday really okay?" "It was fine." He smiled and walked toward the closet. I watched him choose a shirt. Every one of his movements now caught my attention, not out of love, but because I was learning to observe. Michael chose a white dress shirt and turned to me. "I have a meeting with a client today, so I'll probably be home late again." I nodded. "Okay." He didn't notice any change in me, perhaps because for the past 3 years, he had gotten used to my absolute trust. We had breakfast together as usual. Michael read the news on his phone while he ate. I noticed him smile occasionally as he looked at the screen. I asked casually, "What's the good news?" He looked up. "Oh, just some articles about the market." I nodded, but as soon as he got up to get changed, my eyes darted to his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a new message. The sender's name was visible. Maya. The message was short. "See you tonight." I stared at the words for a few seconds, then placed the phone back in its exact spot. My heart wasn't pounding like it did yesterday. Instead, a cold feeling washed over me. Michael came back to the table, picked up his phone without knowing I had seen anything, and put it in his pocket. He smiled at me. "I'm heading out." I nodded. "Okay." The door closed behind him. I stood in the living room for a few minutes. Everything around me was the same, but in my mind, the pieces were connecting. The text from Maya, the lie about the meeting tonight, the evenings with clients. I picked up my phone and looked at Michael's text from last night. "I'll be home a little late tonight. Have a client dinner." I exhaled slowly. A lie repeated so many times. It had become a habit. About half an hour later, I also left for work. On my way to the office, my mind was racing. I had no more doubts, but I needed more evidence. Not to convince myself, but to prepare for the next step. When I arrived at the office, Maya was already there arranging documents on her desk, looking very cheerful. When she saw me, she smiled brightly. "Good morning, Lena." "Morning." I set my bag down and turned on my laptop. A moment later, Maya turned to me. "Lena, last night my boyfriend and I went to that new Japanese restaurant that opened in Soho. It was amazing." I looked up at her. "Oh, really?" "Yeah." He said it had been a while since we had a nice dinner out, so he wanted to treat me. I smiled faintly. "Sounds romantic." Maya laughed shyly. "He's always like that." I turned back to my computer, my mind flashing to the receipt from the Japanese restaurant I'd found last night. It was probably their usual spot. The morning passed with meetings and emails, but amidst the work, I was still quietly observing. Every time Maya's phone buzzed, she would look at the screen and smile. Just before noon, she stood up. "Lena, I'm going downstairs for a coffee. Do you want anything?" "An iced black coffee, please." "Got it." When Maya left her desk, I glanced over at her phone. I didn't touch it, but the screen lit up with a new notification. The sender's name was Michael. I only caught a fragment of the message on the lock screen. "I'm busy this afternoon. I'll pick you up tonight." I quickly turned back to my screen as I heard her footsteps returning. Maya placed the coffee on my desk. Here you go. Thanks. Maya. She sat down and checked her phone. I saw the smile on her face grow even wider. An indescribable feeling washed over me. Not jealousy. Not the sharp pain of yesterday. But a sense of certainty. Michael was living two lives. That afternoon, when it was time to leave, I deliberately stayed a little late. I stood at the building's entrance pretending to look at my phone. About 10 minutes later, I saw Maya walk out. She stood on the sidewalk, looking around as if waiting for someone. A black sedan pulled up in front of her. The door opened, and the person who got out was Michael. He was wearing a white dress shirt, car keys in hand, that familiar smile on his face. Maya ran to him and gave him a hug. I was standing a few dozen yards away, but I could see every movement clearly. Michael leaned down, said something, and then opened the car door for her. They both got in and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time. In that moment, all my doubts vanished. The truth was right in front of me. My husband and the woman who sat next to me every day at the office were in love, and they had no idea that I had seen it all. I turned and walked toward the parking garage. A single thought in my mind. This game had just begun, and this time I would no longer be a bystander. That night, I didn't go straight home. After seeing Michael pick up Maya from work, I drove to the East River waterfront. The city at night was still noisy, but this stretch of the promenade had a strange quietness. I turned off the engine and sat in silence for a long time. The city lights shimmering on the water like broken pieces. My mind felt the same way as the pieces of the truth were finally fitting together. For 3 years, Michael had lived another life right behind my back. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Having dinner with clients now, will probably be late. I looked at the message for a few seconds, then tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I was beginning to understand that texts like this were just part of the act he had been performing for so long. I started the car, left the waterfront, and drove to a small, familiar coffee shop in the West Village. It was where I always met my best friend when I needed to talk. The only person I trusted to listen without judgment. When I walked in, Jessica was already sitting at our usual corner table. She was my friend from college, now a lawyer specializing in asset disputes. She looked at me with some surprise. Lena, you called so urgently. What's wrong? I sat down across from her. A waiter brought my coffee. I looked at the steaming cup and said slowly, Jess, I think Michael is having an affair. Jessica was silent for a few seconds. She didn't seem as shocked as I expected, just furrowed her brow slightly. Are you sure? I nodded. It's not just an affair. It's a long-term relationship. Jessica placed her hands on the table. Tell me everything. I told her from the beginning. My first day at the new company. The picture on Maya's desk. The engagement ring. The texts on his phone. And the moment I stood across the street this afternoon and watched Michael pick her up. Jessica listened intently, not interrupting once. When I finished, she let out a soft sigh. 3 years at least. I confirmed. Jessica looked at me. What are you going to do? I was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. But I know one thing. If this ends, I'm not going to lose everything. Jessica leaned forward slightly. You mean the assets? Yes. I looked into my coffee. This apartment. Our savings. The investments, we built it all together. If he used our joint money to support another life. I need to know. Jessica nodded slowly. You're right. She opened her purse and took out a small notebook. In cases like this, the most important thing is evidence. I looked at her. Evidence? Yes. Jessica said calmly. If you only have suspicions or words, things get very difficult legally. But if you have clear proof of infidelity or the use of marital assets for a third party, you'll have the upper hand. I nodded. I understand. Jessica continued. You need to track 3 things: finances, time, and the relationship itself. I processed what she said. Finances as in whether he's transferring money to her. Time for all those nights he claims to be with clients. and the relationship as in proof that they're living like a couple. I sat in silence for a few seconds. What Jessica was saying mirrored the thoughts that had been running through my head. I'm already doing that. Jessica looked at me. You're calmer than I thought you'd be. I gave a small, weary smile. Maybe because the biggest shock is over. Jessica took a sip of her coffee and then asked, "Does this woman know you're his wife?" I shook my head. No. Jessica sighed. Then she might be a victim in this, too. I think so, too. I remembered Maya's smile when she talked about her future husband. A smile of complete trust. Jessica put her notebook down on the table. Then you need to be even more careful. If Michael finds out you're investigating, he could cover his tracks. I nodded. I get it. Jessica looked at me for a long moment. Lena, are you really okay? I didn't answer right away. I looked out the glass window. The city was still lit up. People were walking by and life out there was carrying on as usual. Not entirely, I said quietly, but I will be. Jessica nodded. Good. She closed her notebook. If you need any legal help, just let me know. Thank you, Jess. We sat for a little longer and then I left. By the time I got home, it was almost 11 p.m. Michael still wasn't back. I walked into the living room and turned on a lamp. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. I went into the bedroom and opened my laptop. A new spreadsheet appeared on the screen. I started documenting everything I knew. Dates, locations, text messages, the nights with clients. Each detail was like a piece of the puzzle I was starting to see more clearly. About half an hour later, the front door opened. Michael walked in looking a little tired. You're still up? I looked up for my laptop. I am. He set his briefcase down. That client meeting ran really long. I nodded. I see. He went into the bathroom. I watched his retreating back. In my mind, Jessica's words echoed. Evidence. Finances. Time. The relationship. This fight was no longer just about emotions. It had become a chess game and I would not make a hasty move because when the truth was fully revealed, I would not be the one losing. The next morning, I woke up to find Michael already gone. Next to me was an empty pillow and a small note on the nightstand in his familiar handwriting. Went to an early meeting with a client. Eat some breakfast. And take care. Before I might have smiled at the small, thoughtful gesture. But now, looking at the note, I just felt a cold emptiness. The caring words were still there, but their meaning had changed. I got out of bed, made a coffee, and sat at the desk in our living room. My laptop was open. The spreadsheet from last night still on the screen. The rows documenting time, places, and Michael's lies were growing into a system. But as Jessica had said, one of the most important pieces was still missing. The money trail. I opened our banking app. The joint account for the two of us was used for all our household expenses. Michael was the primary manager of it since he worked in finance. I had never suspected anything before, so I rarely checked the details. Today was the first time I was looking at every transaction. A long list appeared on the screen. Electricity bills, water, groceries, building management fees, all normal. I scrolled further down to the transactions from the last 3 months. Then I saw a transfer for $20,000. The recipient, McHen. I stopped. I read the line again to make sure I wasn't mistaken. McHen. The transfer was from late last month. I scrolled down. Another one for $15,000 also to M. Chen. That one was from 2 months ago. A chill ran down my spine. I kept scrolling. 3 months. 4 months. 6 months back. The transfers were recurring. Sometimes $5,000. Sometimes $10,000. Sometimes tens of thousands. I closed my eyes for a second. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He was using our joint money to support her. I opened the spreadsheet and started recording every transaction. Date. Amount. Recipient. Each number was like a small needle piercing the truth I was trying to face calmly. After nearly an hour, I had compiled all the transfers from the past year. The total amount sent to McHen was over $150. 000. I sat silently in front of the screen. $150. 000. That was not a small amount. And it certainly wasn't just Michael's money. The majority of the funds in our joint account came from our combined savings over many years. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a moment, then replied, I just found something. What? Our joint account has transferred over $150. 000 to her. Jessica called me immediately. Lena, are you serious? Yes. I could hear Jessica take a deep breath on the other end. Then this isn't just about the affair anymore. What do you mean? I mean, if that money is marital property, him transferring it to a third party could become a serious legal issue. I looked back at the spreadsheet. I've saved all the transaction records. Good, Jessica said immediately. You need to back everything up. Take screenshots. Save the files. Email them to a private account. Okay. And whatever you do, don't let him know you found out. I understand. The call ended. I started doing exactly as Jessica advised, screenshotting every transaction, saving them to a separate folder, and emailing it to myself. By the time I was finished, it was almost noon. I was getting ready to leave for work when my phone rang again. It was Michael. I answered. I forgot to ask. Are you working late today? I have a meeting with a partner tonight. I looked at the spreadsheet on my laptop where the numbers were laid out as clearly as an indictment. Yes, I said calmly. I might be late, too. He chuckled softly. Looks like we're both having a late dinner then. I didn't reply. After hanging up, I closed my laptop and left the apartment. When I got to the office, Maya was at her desk looking very happy. She saw me and said, Lena, last night, Michael and I went to that amazing new restaurant. It was so beautiful. I set my bag down. Oh, yeah. Yes, and he said we can start looking at condos in Tribeca soon. I looked at her for a few seconds. Condos. Maya nodded, her eyes shining. He said a man should have a home ready before he gets married. I turned back to my computer screen. My mind flashed to a large transaction in our account. $30. 000 down payment to a real estate company. The transfer date was just last week. That afternoon, while everyone in the office was busy, I quietly opened the spreadsheet again. The numbers on the screen no longer made me tremble. They made me clear-headed. Michael thought he was in control of everything. But in reality, every transaction he made left a trail. And those trails were slowly becoming the most powerful weapon in my hands. I clicked save. A new thought slowly forming in my mind. If Michael wanted to build a new life with our money, I would be the one to make him pay for every single dollar. After discovering the money transfers, my mind became strangely clear. Every detail of Michael's daily life now seemed like a puzzle piece that could lead me to a larger truth. The morning at the office passed normally, but inside I was anything but normal. Maya came in a little late today. As she walked in, she was carrying a large shopping bag from a luxury brand. The moment she sat down, she opened the bag and took out a shoe box. Lena. She turned to me, her voice cheerful. Look at these. Aren't they gorgeous? I glanced over. A pair of beige high heels. Exquisitely designed. Clearly not cheap. They are beautiful. Maya beamed. Michael bought them for me last night. I nodded. Your boyfriend really spoils you. She gave a small, pleased laugh. He says a woman deserves to be taken care of. I turned back to my computer. In my head, I recalled a charge on our joint credit card from last night. $800. A high-end fashion boutique in a downtown mall. I exhaled slowly. Every small detail was fitting together with a chilling perfection. That afternoon, the team went out for lunch again. Maya sat next to me, chatting as we ate. Lena, we went to see a condo in Tribeca yesterday. I looked up. Oh, yes. She nodded, her eyes sparkling. It was beautiful. The view of the river was amazing. A curious colleague asked, how much is a place like that? Maya looked a little shy. Around $3 million. Everyone's eyes widened. Your boyfriend is that rich? Maya smiled. He works in investment finance. I picked up my glass of water and took a sip. $3 million. I thought about the $30,000 down payment I'd seen in our account. It meant Michael was truly serious about this plan. A new condo. A new life. A new family. That evening after work, I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I followed them. I left the office a few minutes early and sat in a coffee shop across the street from our building. From there, I had a clear view of the entrance. About 15 minutes later, Maya came out. She stood waiting as she usually did. A few minutes later, Michael's familiar car pulled up. I saw him get out. That smile on his face that I once thought was only for me. Maya ran to him and hugged him. He leaned down and said something that made her laugh. I sat in the coffee shop, my hand gripping my cold glass of water. They got into the car and drove off. I stood up, paid, and went to the parking garage. I kept a safe distance, but close enough to see Michael's car ahead. The car drove over the Brooklyn Bridge. My heart started to beat a little faster. Soon, the car stopped in front of a luxury high-rise condo building, still under construction near the waterfront. I parked across the street and got out. From a distance, I saw Michael and Maya standing in front of a project model with a sales agent. Maya was looking at the model with a dreamy expression. Michael stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The sales agent said something and pointed to a tower in the model. Michael nodded. Maya took his hand, her face as radiant as a girl, seeing her future laid out before her. I stood about 100 feet away from them, far enough that they wouldn't notice me. I watched the scene for a few minutes. In my mind, an image of the apartment Michael and I lived in appeared. 7 years ago, we had chosen every piece of furniture, every paint color together. Michael had once told me that our home would be the place we grew old together. And now he was standing in front of another home with another woman. I didn't get any closer. I just took out my phone and took a few pictures from a distance. Not because I wanted to preserve this heartbreaking moment, but because I needed evidence. After about 20 minutes, Michael and Maya left the sales gallery. They got into the car and drove away. I stood there for another moment before returning to my car. On the drive back, the city began to light up. The skyscrapers glowed like giant glass structures. A thought grew clearer and clearer in my mind. Michael thought he was building a new future, but he didn't know that his every move was leaving a trail. And I was right behind him, picking up every clue. When I got home, Michael wasn't back yet. I opened my laptop and uploaded the pictures I had just taken. In the photos, Michael and Maya stood together in front of the condo model, looking exactly like a couple about to buy a home. I saved the file in a password-protected folder. Then I opened my spreadsheet and added a new line. Date. Location. Tribeca Condo Sales Gallery. I stared at the screen for a long time. My marriage may have been broken 3 years ago, but the real fight had only just begun. That night, I went to bed very late. Not because of the heartbreak like in the first few days, but because my mind was working non-stop. The pieces of information I had gathered over the past few days were starting to form a clear picture. The text messages, the receipts, the money trail, the meetings, the Tribeca condo. It all led to the same conclusion. Michael had been preparing for a new life for a long time. And that life did not include me. The next morning when I woke up, Michael was still home. He was in the kitchen making coffee, looking completely calm. When he saw me, he smiled. "You're up?" I nodded. "Morning." He placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "I made you one." I looked at the coffee, then at him. In my mind, I saw the image from last night. Him standing next to Maya in front of the condo model, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. A very familiar gesture. A gesture he used to give me when we were newlyweds. I sat down. "You're not leaving early today?" Michael shook his head. "Late meeting today." He sat down across from me and started reading the news on his phone. The kitchen was quiet except for the clinking of a spoon against a mug. After a moment, he looked up. "You seem busy lately." I looked at him. "New company. A lot to do." He nodded. "Me, too." We spoke like two perfectly normal people. No arguments, no suspicion. But I knew there was a chasm between us that he hadn't yet noticed. After breakfast, Michael left first. I stayed for a few more minutes, then got ready for work. Before leaving the apartment, I opened my laptop and checked the evidence folder I had created. The photos from Tribeca, the spreadsheet of money transfers, the screenshots of text messages. I looked at it all for a few seconds, then closed the laptop. Today, I was planning to do something important. When I got to the office, Maya was already there. She was on the phone, her voice very happy. Yes, let's have dinner tonight. I miss you, too. I set my bag down, pretending not to notice. But I already knew who was on the other end of the line. When Maya hung up, she turned to me. Lena, are you busy today? I was hoping you could take a look at a marketing proposal for Michael's project. I paused for a second. Your boyfriend's project? Yes. She nodded. He's preparing to invest in a new fintech startup. He said good marketing would make it easier to raise capital. I looked at her for a few moments. Okay. Send it over. Maya opened her laptop and sent me the file. I opened it. On the first page was the logo of a newly established investment firm. The company name Vance Capital. I frowned. The name was too familiar. I scrolled down to the legal information section of the project. The name of the legal representative. Michael Vance. I sat still for a few seconds. What caught my attention wasn't that he had started a new company, but the list of shareholders. A name appeared right below his Maya Chen. Shareholder percentage 20%. I looked up at the woman sitting across from me. She was still smiling, completely unaware of what I had just read. What do you think, Lena? I closed the file. The marketing ideas aren't bad. Maya smiled happily. I knew it. Michael said, if this project is successful, we'll have a very strong financial foundation. I nodded. He trusts you that much? Yes. She nodded proudly. He said, I'm the person he trusts the most. A bitter feeling washed over me. The person he trusts the most. I wondered how many times Michael had said that to me over the past 7 years. That afternoon, I left work early. Not because I was tired, but because I needed to confirm one more thing. I drove to an office building in the financial district. This was the registered address of the new company I had just seen in the proposal. After asking the receptionist, I went up to the 8th floor. A small office with a sign that read Vance Capital was in front of me. I stood before the door for a few seconds. I could hear voices inside. I looked through the frosted glass. Michael was sitting in a meeting room. Beside him was Maya. They were talking to another investor. A business plan laid out on the table. That scene made me understand something crucial. Michael wasn't just having an affair. He was building a new company with Maya. A new future. A new life. And all of it may have been built with my money. I turned and left the building. In my head, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This fight was no longer just about our marriage. It was about money, assets, and years of betrayal. And now I had enough reason to take the next step. That evening, when I returned to the apartment, the city was already aglow with lights. The wind from the river blew through the balcony, making the curtains sway gently. I stood in the living room for a long time before turning on the lights. The familiar home suddenly felt strange. Every object, every corner of the room brought back memories of the years when I believed this marriage was my final destination. But now that the truth had slowly emerged, I understood that some things that seem solid are just shells built with clever lies. I opened my laptop and reviewed all the documents I had collected over the past few days. The money transfers to Maya, the photos from Tribeca, the information about Vance Capital, the shareholder list with Maya's name. It was all neatly organized in a password-protected folder. I called Jessica. She answered almost immediately. Any updates? I spoke slowly. Michael started a new company. Jessica was silent for a few seconds. What kind of company? It's called Vance Capital. Who are the shareholders? Him and Maya. I could hear Jessica exhale on the other end. So, he wasn't just having an affair. He was preparing a separate financial life. Yes. I said, looking at my laptop screen. And I suspect the initial capital might have come from our joint funds. If that's true, Jessica said immediately. This is a very serious matter. I think so, too. Jessica paused for a moment, then asked, "What's your next move?" I looked out at the balcony. The city below was a sea of brilliant lights. "I want to confirm exactly where that money went." "You'll need to be careful," Jessica advised, though I couldn't see her nodding. "I know. The best thing to do is back up all the financial data from the joint account before he finds out." "I've already done it." Jessica chuckled softly. "You're faster than I thought." I smiled faintly. Maybe because I have no other choice. The call ended. Around 10 p.m. The front door opened. Michael walked in looking quite relaxed. He took off his jacket, hung it up, and saw me sitting in the living room. "You're still up?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He walked over and sat in the chair across from me. "I was busy all day." I looked at him for a few seconds. "Is your new project going well?" Michael paused. "Just for a second. But I noticed it." "Which project are you talking about?" "The finance one." I replied calmly. "You said you were preparing a new investment." He nodded. "Oh, that. It's going okay." He looked at me. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just curious." Michael gave a small smile, but his eyes seemed to be studying me. "Since when are you so interested in investing?" "My husband is in the industry," I said. "It's normal for me to ask." He nodded, then stood up and went to the kitchen for water. I watched him go. Michael had no idea that just a few hours ago, I was standing in front of his new office. He had no idea I had seen Maya's name on the shareholder list. And he certainly had no idea that I had recorded every dollar he had transferred. When he returned to the living room, I had already closed my laptop. He sat down next to me. "You've been working too hard lately." I looked at him. "You too." Michael smiled. "Yeah. This phase is a bit hectic." I nodded. A strange feeling rose within me. It wasn't pain or anger anymore, but a calm so profound it felt cold. I stood up. "I'm going to bed." "Okay," he replied. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. As I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. What I knew now was enough to understand the whole story. Michael was having an affair. He was using our joint money to support Maya. He had started a new company with her and was planning to buy a separate condo. A new life was being built step by step. The only thing was he thought I still knew nothing. The next morning when I arrived at the office, Maya was at her computer looking very happy. "Lena," she called to me. Michael said, "Our project is about to land an investor." I set my bag down. "Oh, really?" "Yes." She smiled radiantly. "If this is successful, we can expand the company." I nodded. "Congratulations." Maya looked at me. "You're always so calm." I gave a small smile. "You get used to it after working in marketing for a while." She smiled and went back to her work. I opened my laptop, but my eyes drifted to the picture frame on her desk. In the photo, Michael was smiling. The same smile he used to give me in the early years of our marriage. I suddenly realized something. Maya might not be the one who broke up my family. She was just living in the story Michael had told her. A story in which he was probably single or separated or about to get a divorce. But that didn't change the truth. The truth was that he had betrayed me. And I would not let this story end the way he wanted. I opened my spreadsheet and added a new line to the evidence list. Date. Location. Vance Capital Office. Shareholders. Michael Vance and Maya Chen. I hit save. The first move was complete. Now I just had to wait for the right moment to make the next one. In the days that followed, I lived as if nothing had changed. I went to work, attended meetings, came home, had dinner with Michael, and talked about ordinary things. To an outsider, we would have looked like a stable couple. No fights, no tension, even occasional caring words. Just like before. But only I knew that behind this facade of normally, a plan was taking shape. At the office, I sat next to Maya as usual. She became more and more open with me, probably thinking I was an easy person to confide in. Whenever something good happened with her boyfriend, she would tell me first. One day at lunch, Maya pulled her chair closer to mine. "Lena," she began. "Can I ask you for some advice?" I looked at her. "About what?" She hesitated for a moment. "How long do you think a man would wait to get married if he was really serious?" I didn't answer right away. "Why do you ask?" Maya looked down at her hands, her voice a little shy. "Michael and I have been together for 3 years. He said, well, get married after his new project is stable." I looked at the young woman in front of me. 3 years. The same amount of time I discovered their relationship had been going on. "Do you trust him?" I asked. Maya nodded with absolute certainty. "Of course. He's never let me down." I gave a faint nod. "Then that's good." She smiled. "He even said that once the new company is established, we'll move into the condo in Tribeca. Don't you think that area is beautiful?" I remembered the afternoon I stood 100 feet away from them at the project sales gallery. "It's beautiful," I said. "The river view is great." Maya was delighted. "I love it, too." She paused for a moment, then added, "Michael says a man should have a home before he gets married." I smiled faintly. He's right. But in my mind, I was thinking of something else. Maya had no idea she was the other woman. She was living in a story Michael had created just for her. A story in which he was probably a single man or one on the verge of divorce. That evening after work, Maya was standing at the entrance waiting. As usual, I walked past her. "Your boyfriend on his way?" "Yeah. He should be here in a few minutes." She smiled. "He rarely keeps me waiting." I nodded and walked to the parking garage. But instead of leaving right away, I sat in my car for a while. A few minutes later, Michael's car appeared. He got out, opened the door for Maya, and they both got in. The scene had become familiar to me. But this time, I didn't follow them. I just sat in my car watching their car leave the lot. A slow thought formed in my mind. Michael was living in 2 worlds. One world as the caring husband in our apartment, the other as the successful man preparing to marry a new wife and build a new company. The problem was those 2 worlds were about to collide. When I got home that night, Michael was already there watching TV in the living room. "You're home?" "Yes." I set my bag down. He looked at me for a moment. "You seem tired lately." "Just work," I replied. He stood up, went to the kitchen for water, and came back. "Let's go out for dinner this weekend." I looked at him. "Why?" He smiled. "It's been a while since we've gone out. Just the 2 of us." I nodded. "Okay." Michael didn't know that his words reminded me of what Maya had told me. The evenings he claimed to be with clients. The dinners at the Japanese restaurant. The expensive gifts. I sat down in the chair across from him. A new idea suddenly popped into my head. If Michael could live 2 lives at once, then maybe it was time for those 2 lives to meet. That night in bed, I thought for a long time. Not about divorce. Not about confrontation. But about how to let the truth reveal itself. The next morning at the office, Maya was looking at her phone with a very happy expression. "Lena," she said, "next week, Michael's company is hosting a meeting for investors. He's asked me to go with him." I looked at her. "Oh, yes." She smiled. "He wants to introduce me to everyone." I nodded. "Congratulations." Maya happily returned to her work. While I opened my laptop, it occurred to me that this investor meeting might be the perfect time for everything to change. An investor meeting. A new company. A man trying to build a second life. And a wife he believed still knew nothing. I clicked save on my evidence file. The game was halfway through. And the next move would change everything. After hearing Maya talk about the investor meeting for Vance Capital, my mind immediately started calculating. An event like that would undoubtedly have many attendees. Partners. Investors. Industry friends. More importantly, it was where Michael wanted to publicly present himself as the founder of a new company. And if Maya was invited to attend with him, he likely saw her as a part of his future. The morning at the office was quiet. But my mind was anything but. I opened my laptop and reviewed the evidence I had collected. The photos from Tribeca. the records of money transfers, the company's shareholder information. It all felt like a map leading me to the moment I had been waiting for. Around 10:00 am. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Busy with meetings at lunch. Go ahead and eat without me. I stared at the message for a few seconds. Okay. I replied curtly. Before, I would have thought he was genuinely busy. Now, I knew many of those meetings were just lunches with Maya. At noon, as everyone was getting ready for lunch, Maya turned to me. Lena, she said, that investor meeting next week is going to be so exciting. Where is it? I asked. The Riverside Hotel in Midtown, she said with enthusiasm. Michael said a lot of important people from the industry will be there. I nodded. Sounds important. Maya smiled. He said, it's the first step to getting the company funded. I looked at her for a few seconds. He must really trust you. She nodded. Michael said I've been his partner from the very beginning. I gave a faint smile. In my heart, I thought that while Michael might truly trust her, that didn't change the fact that he was betraying me. That afternoon, I worked with intense focus. Not because the workload was heavier, but because I was preparing a new move. Around 400 p.m., I called Jessica. What's up? She answered. I think it's time. Time for what? For everything to come out. Jessica was silent for a few seconds. What are you planning to do? I'm going to that investor meeting. Jessica immediately understood. As who? As Michael Vance's wife. On the other end of the line, Jessica let out a small laugh. Not a bad idea. I think so, too. Jessica thought for a moment, then said, if you show up there, everything will change instantly. I know. Are you ready? I looked out the office window at the skyscrapers, standing silently in the afternoon sun. I've been ready since I found out the truth. Then you need to prepare carefully, Jessica said. I will. The call ended. That evening, when I got home, Michael was in the living room with his laptop on the coffee table. He seemed to be working. When he saw me walk in, he looked up. You're home? Yes. I set my bag down. Are you busy? Yeah, he said. Preparing for the investor meeting next week. I walked closer. At the Riverside Hotel. Right? Michael paused for a second. How did you know? A friend mentioned it. I lied. He nodded. Yeah. It's just a small gathering. I sat in the chair across from him. Are you inviting a lot of people? Just a few investors and partners, he said. It's not a big event. I nodded. In my mind, I thought that he certainly never considered the possibility of me showing up there. Michael closed his laptop. Are you busy this weekend? Let's go out for dinner. I looked at him for a few seconds. Okay, he smiled. I want us to have some time for ourselves. I nodded, my mind again flashing to the times he had likely said the same thing to Maya. After dinner, I went to the bedroom earlier than usual, but I didn't sleep right away. I opened my phone and looked up the address of the Riverside Hotel. The investor meeting was on Friday night of next week. Only a few days away. I stared at the screen for a long time. It was possible that when that moment arrived, everything would change completely. My marriage, Michael's life, and the world Maya believed in. But I knew one thing. The truth cannot be hidden forever. And if Michael had built two parallel lives, I would be the one to make them meet. The days leading up to the investor meeting passed more slowly than usual. On the outside, my life went on as normal. I went to work, attended meetings, came home for dinner, and made small talk with Michael. But on the inside, my every thought revolved around one thing. The upcoming Friday night. It would be the moment all the facades began to crack. At the office, Maya seemed happier than ever. She talked constantly about the upcoming meeting with unconcealed excitement. One morning, as I set my bag down, I saw her sitting at her desk, touching up her makeup in a small mirror. Lena, she asked, what color dress do you think I should wear to the meeting? I sat down and looked over. What are your options? Maya showed me a few pictures on her phone. Red, white, and a deep blue. I looked them over. The white one. It looks more elegant. She nodded. I thought so too. She smiled. her eyes shining. Michael said this event is very important to him. I asked casually, so, he'll probably be very busy. Yes, Maya said, but he still insisted I come with him so he can introduce me to everyone. I nodded. Once again, that strange feeling washed over me. Maya completely believed she was stepping into a serious future with this man. She had no idea that elsewhere in this city, he still had a legal wife. That afternoon, I left work a little early, not because I was tired, but because I had some preparations to make. I drove to a large department store in Midtown. After parking, I went straight to a high-end boutique. The dresses on the racks shimmered under the lights. A sales associate approached me. Are you looking for an evening gown? I nodded. Yes, for an event on Friday night. The associate smiled. Are you looking for something glamorous or more understated? I looked around. Elegant. A few minutes later, she brought out several dresses. I chose a long black gown. Simple in design, but very sophisticated. When I tried it on in front of the mirror, I looked at myself for a long time. The woman in the mirror was not the same person I was a few weeks ago. Her eyes were calmer, sharper. I bought the dress. Then I stopped by a salon and made an appointment for Friday evening. By the time I left the mall, it was getting dark. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. I'm working late tonight. I read the message and turned off the screen. I didn't need to guess where he was. Probably having dinner with Maya or discussing their new project. But it no longer mattered. When I got home, the apartment was dark. I turned on the lights, placed my shopping bag on the table, and went out to the balcony. The city below was as vibrant as ever. Cars flowed endlessly, a river of red and yellow lights. I wondered, out of the thousands of people moving out there, how many were living stories like mine? Stories of trust, betrayal, and cleverly constructed facades. Around 10:30 p.m., the door opened. Michael walked in. You're still up? I am. I turned from the balcony. He looked at me for a few seconds. What were you doing out there? Just looking at the city. He gave a small smile. It's been a while since I've stood out here. He came and stood next to me. We both looked down at the illuminated city. I've been a little busy this week. He said, the investor meeting is on Friday night. I nodded. You told me. Michael turned to look at me. After that, things should progress well. Your project? I asked. Yeah. He said with a confident air. If we secure the funding, the company will grow very quickly. I nodded. Good luck. Michael smiled. Thanks, honey. We stood there in silence for a moment. He had no idea that in just a few days, that very meeting could become the biggest turning point of his life. That night, as I lay in bed, I didn't fall asleep right away. I thought about Friday night, about the conference room at the Riverside Hotel, about the investors, the partners, and the moment Michael might see me walk in wearing the black dress I had just bought. I didn't know exactly what would happen after that, but I knew one thing. When the truth comes out, no one can pretend everything is okay anymore. I closed my eyes. The night before the storm is always quiet. But that quietness is the very sign that everything is about to change. Friday night finally arrived. Throughout the day, I worked almost on autopilot. The meetings, the emails, the marketing plans all proceeded as usual. But my mind was almost entirely focused on the evening ahead. The moment I had been waiting for weeks. In the afternoon, as I was getting ready to leave the office, Maya turned to me with an excited look. Lena, she said, I'm leaving early to get ready for the meeting tonight. I smiled. Have a great time. She beamed. Thanks, Lena. Maya packed her things and left. As her figure disappeared down the hall, I sat still for a few more minutes. A strange sense of calm washed over me. No more nervousness. No more anxiety. Just the certainty that tonight everything would change. I left the office about an hour later. Before heading to the Riverside Hotel, I stopped at the salon for my appointment. Looking at myself in the mirror after my hair and makeup were done, I saw a very different version of myself. The woman in the mirror was no longer the naive person who believed her marriage would last forever. Her eyes were calm, sharp, and seemed prepared for any possibility. I put on the long black dress I had bought, threw on a light coat, and drove to the hotel. When I walked into the lobby, it was almost 8:00 p.m. The grand entrance hall was brightly lit, the tall glass panels reflecting the sparkling lights. I asked the concierge for the conference room for the Vance Capital event and followed the long hallway to the event space. The door to the conference room was slightly ajar, and I could hear the murmur of conversation from inside. I paused for a second before stepping in. Inside, about 30 people were standing in small groups talking. A long table was set up at the front with a large Vance Capital logo displayed on a screen behind it. And in the center of the room, Michael was talking to a group of investors. He was wearing a dark blue suit, his face confident, that familiar smile on his lips. Beside him was Maya in the white dress she had asked my opinion on a few days ago. She stood very close to him, looking every bit his partner in business and in life. I stood at the entrance for a few seconds. An event staffer saw me and walked over. "Are you here for the event?" I nodded. "Yes." She smiled and handed me a blank name tag. "Please write your name here." I took the pen and wrote 2 words. Lena Hayes. Then I walked into the room. At first, no one noticed me. People were still chatting, exchanging business cards, and laughing about investment projects. I slowly walked around the room, observing everything. Michael hadn't seen me yet. Maya was talking to a young female investor, her face radiant as if tonight were a major milestone in her life. I walked over to the refreshments table and picked up a glass of water. Just then, Michael turned his head. His eyes scanned the crowd and then landed on me. In that instant, I saw his face change. The smile vanished, his eyes widened, and his entire body seemed to freeze for a split second. I gave a small smile and walked straight toward him. A few people nearby started to take notice, perhaps sensing the unusual shift in the host's expression. When I stood in front of him, Michael still couldn't speak. I spoke first. "Hello, Michael." My voice was so calm it surprised even me. Maya turned to look at me. "Lena." She seemed surprised to see me here. I looked at her, then back at Michael. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" Michael was silent for a few seconds before he finally managed to whisper, "Lena, what are you doing here?" I smiled. "You're hosting such a big event. Why wouldn't you invite your wife?" The room around us suddenly grew quieter. A few people nearby started looking our way. Maya looked at me, then at Michael. "Wife?" Her voice trembled slightly. I turned to her. "Yes, I'm his wife." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Michael took a step forward. "Lena." I looked straight into his eyes. "Aren't you going to tell everyone?" Maya took a step back, her face turning pale. "Michael, what is this?" Michael didn't answer right away. I looked around the room and spoke loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "I apologize for interrupting the event, but perhaps before we discuss investments, everyone should know a small piece of information." I gestured toward the screen behind Michael, where the Vance Capital logo was still displayed. "The founder of this company is my husband." A wave of quiet murmurs spread through the crowd. I continued. "And one of the company's shareholders is the woman he's been having an affair with for the past 3 years. The room fell completely silent. Maya stood frozen, her face ashen. Michael looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and panic. I just stood there calmly, watching it all unfold, because finally the truth was out. The conference room was almost frozen solid after my announcement. The laughter and chatter had vanished, replaced by a sea of stares directed at us. The investors who had been discussing capital minutes ago were now looking at Michael with suspicion. Michael stood before me, his face a mask of tension. I could clearly see the panic in his eyes, an emotion I had never witnessed in our 7 years together. "Lena," he hissed. "Let's go outside and talk." I shook my head. "No need. We can talk right here." Maya standing beside him was still clutching her glass. Her hand was shaking so much that water sloshed over the rim. "Michael," She looked at him. Her voice barely a whisper. What is she saying? Before Michael could respond, an older man from the group of investors spoke up. Excuse me, he said, looking at Michael. She said she's your wife. Michael was silent for a few seconds. I stared at him. Tell them. Michael. He took a deep breath. This is a private matter, he said to the investors. It has nothing to do with the project. A few people in the room exchanged glances. I offered a small cold smile. Nothing to do with it. I'm sorry to trouble everyone, but perhaps you should all know that a portion of this company's seed money came from my husband and I's joint bank account. A new wave of murmurs rippled through the room instantly. A younger man asked, "What do you mean by that?" I looked at him. I mean, the founder of this company used our family's marital assets to fund his new venture without his wife's knowledge. Mia whipped her head around to face Michael. You told me you were single, she said, her voice cracking. You told me you'd never been married. Michael clenched his fists. Maya. I looked at the young woman before me. In that moment, I no longer saw her as the person who had ruined my marriage. I just saw a woman who had just realized she had been living a massive lie. You didn't know? I asked her gently. Maya shook her head, her eyes turning red. No. He told me he lived alone. Michael stepped closer to me. Lena. Stop it. I looked at him. Why? Are you afraid of everyone knowing the truth? An investor standing nearby muttered to the person next to him. I think we should reconsider this. Another nodded in agreement. The atmosphere in the room was shifting rapidly. The people who had been excited about the project were now taking a step back. Michael realized it. He turned to me, his voice lower but filled with tension. You're ruining everything. I looked at him calmly. No. Michael. You're the one who ruined everything. I opened my purse and took out a pre-printed stack of papers. They were copies of the bank statements from our joint account. I placed the stack on the table. Here are all the records of the money transfers. Over $150,000 in total. All of it sent to the second shareholder of this company. A few people in the room stepped closer to the table to look. Maya glanced down at the papers and her face grew even paler. You sent me money from your wife's account. Michael didn't answer. The older investor shook his head. I think we should postpone this meeting. Another chimed in. Agreed. This needs to be clarified. One by one, people started to leave the room. The promising investor meeting had disintegrated in a matter of minutes. Michael stood in the middle of the room, his face white. Mia looked at him with an expression of pure betrayal. You said you loved me, she whispered. You said we were going to get married. Michael approached her. Maya. I can explain. She recoiled. Explain what? That you have a wife. That you lied to me for 3 years. Tears began to stream down her face. I stood a few feet away, saying nothing more. The truth was now speaking for itself. Maya looked at me. How long have you known? For a few weeks. She bowed her head, tears falling onto her white dress. I didn't know. She choked out. I honestly didn't know. I gave a slight nod. I believe you. She turned to look at Michael one last time. You didn't just betray your wife. You betrayed me, too. With that, she turned and walked out of the conference room. The door closed behind her, leaving just Michael and me in the room. He stood silently for a few seconds, then looked at me, his eyes filled with rage. Are you happy now? I looked at him calmly. Not yet. But at least now everyone knows the truth. Michael let out a bitter laugh. You think you've won by doing this? I shrugged. This isn't a competition. This is just the consequence of your actions. He said nothing more, just stood there staring at the emptying room. As for me, I turned and walked out of the conference room. My marriage had ended long before tonight. I left the conference room as the door swung shut behind me. The hallway of the Riverside Hotel was much quieter than the room where the storm had just broken. The sound of my heels echoed softly on the polished marble floor. I walked slowly without rushing, without looking back. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, looking at my reflection in the polished steel. My face was calmer than I expected. No tears. No explosive anger. Just a clear feeling that a chapter of my life had just closed. When the elevator reached the lobby, I stepped out. The New York night was as bustling as ever. Cars streamed by, the golden street lights stretching along the riverfront. The city kept moving. Even though my life had just changed so much in a few short hours, I stood in front of the hotel for a few minutes, taking a deep breath. My phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Jessica. I answered. "It's done," I said. Jessica was quiet for a second. "Are you okay?" I watched the traffic flow past. "I'm okay." Jessica let out a sigh of relief. "How did it go?" I gave her a brief summary of the events in the conference room. Michael's expression when he saw me. Maya's reaction. The investor's departure. When I finished, Jessica chuckled softly. "You know, that was probably the most memorable investor meeting of his life." I smiled faintly. "Probably. What's your next move?" Jessica asked. I looked up at the night sky. "Divorce." Jessica's response was immediate. "I'll help you. The evidence you've collected is crucial." "I know," I said. "He used our joint assets to fund his company and support his affair. That will work in your favor," Jessica affirmed. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. I walked to the parking garage, opened my car door, and sat in the driver's seat. Before starting the engine, I glanced at my phone one more time. 12 missed calls. All from Michael. I placed the phone on the passenger seat without calling back. Some conversations were no longer necessary. I drove back to our apartment. When I opened the door, the familiar home was as quiet as ever. But the feeling inside me was different. No longer heavy like in the first few days of discovery, but instead a light, empty relief. I went out to the balcony. From there, I could see the river shimmering with reflected lights. The night wind blew through my hair. 7 years of marriage. 3 years of betrayal. A few weeks to bring the truth to light. I didn't know what the future held, but at least I knew I had chosen to face the truth instead of continuing to live a lie. Around midnight, the front door opened. Michael walked in. He stood in the living room for a moment before seeing me on the balcony. "Lena." His voice was hoarse. I turned around. "You're home." He walked out onto the balcony. The air between us was heavy, but not as charged as it had been in the conference room. Michael looked at me. "Did you have to do that?" I looked straight into his eyes. "Did you think I had any other choice?" He was silent. I continued. 3 years. Michael, you lived a double life for 3 years. You lied to me and you lied to her. You used our family's money to build a new life. Michael clenched his fists. "I was going to tell you." I let out a soft, mirthless laugh. "When? After you bought the condo? After your company secured its funding?" He didn't answer. After a long moment, he said quietly, "I'm sorry." I looked at him for a few seconds. That apology had come far too late. "Let's get a divorce," I said, my voice perfectly calm. Michael closed his eyes for a moment. "You've already decided?" "Yes. Jessica will be in touch with a lawyer." He nodded slowly. There were no arguments. No begging. Just two people facing an end they both knew was inevitable. Michael went back inside first. I stayed on the balcony for a little while longer, looking down at the city lights. I suddenly realized that sometimes ending something is the only way to truly begin again. This is a fictional story I have created based on emotional slices of life. The AI voice is used to convey the story to the audience, helping them draw valuable life lessons through the narrative. The characters in this story do not represent any specific individuals. Lessons from the story. First, trust in a marriage is precious, but it must be built on mutual honesty and respect. Second, remaining silent in the face of warning signs can often allow problems to fester and become more severe. Third, when confronting betrayal, composure and clarity are your greatest strengths. Fourth, women should strive for financial independence and awareness to protect themselves. Fifth, the truth can be hidden for a time, but it will eventually come to light. Thank you for your patience in listening to this entire